Welcome back to Pale Cachexia, Gothic themed horror visual novel. We found somebody who would know an apothecary, but unfortunately that apothecary has passed away. Not a strong storm, but a steady one, quietly smothering the house in a downpour that had seemingly lasted for weeks. So this is not the first time that the rain's been here. Hello there. Dark, heavy drops sluggishly coursed down the window pane, forming jagged patterns that soon dissolved into nothingness. Who is this chap? His gaze followed their ambling paths, watching them aimlessly and without pleasure. But there was nothing else to look at. No impulse to pull him out of this empty staring, and into something, anything, that would serve more of a purpose. How long had he been standing here? Bizarrely, he couldn't even remember how long he stood there, for he just kept wandering into the realms of the nothingness. Had it been minutes, hours, days even? Was it morning, evening? How was it possible to tell, when the clouds blurred all sense of light and time? I'm pretty sure there was some light involved. It was only her occasional visits that separated the days for him. That soft, timid, infuriating, insistent knocking. A reminder that she'd left a tray of food outside his locked bedroom door. Always followed by an uncertain voice calling out for him. Then a long pause, before finally her soft footsteps padded away down the stairs. "Little wretch," he whispered flatly to his reflection, which only stared back at him with grey irises. "Oh dear, have you been up for so long you've forgotten to know how to sleep?" He held himself in here to be away from both of them, and her, away from her constant smiling, her laughter, that boundless energy that seemed to be mocking him from his pathetic state, that twisted, ungrateful creature. He should have believed his instincts about her from the very beginning. So from what I can gather so far is that we're at some point in the past or the future here. But considering that there is a male here and not with the other two characters, this has to be in the past. Now this could be someone related to Esther, or it could be someone related to the apothecary's daughter, let's say her father. With an immense, painful effort he pulled himself away from the window. Leaning on his splintered cane, the man staggered towards the bed, where he collapsed onto the sheets like a puppet with severed strings. This could be the apothecary's father. I've forgotten her name now. As he curled into a fetal huddle and hacked his arms around his body, he ran his fingers across the sickly protrusion of ribs pressing against his skin, sharp bones contained by only a thin layer of flesh. Yikes. So it has to be the apothecary's father, because he too has cachexia. If he held himself like this, he could feel the hard, slow, rhythmic beating of his heart. The tightness in his chest made it difficult to breathe deeply, and so his inhales were shallow and jagged. Was it anxiety, his breath, or worrying about his health that made his ribcage feel like it was always being crushed? Or an amalgamation of two, or all of the above? Or maybe it's none of the above and it's something else. That's most unlikely. He rolled over onto his right side, closing his eyes, trying desperately to ignore the uneven pounding in his chest. Argent Games presents... So that was only the introduction to the game. Pale Cachexia, in all of its spoopy Gothic glory, and fantasy as well, because considering alchemy is no such thing in the real world. I keep forgetting your name, this begins with a C, and a mysterious man who I can only imagine is the not the apothecary's father, the apothecary herself, and it goes to the apothecary's daughter. The visuals in this game are beautiful, by the way. They really show a lot of emotion behind it and a lot of detail. And you're there with your beloved watch, or cursed watch, to say so. Because remember last time that she had to use something inside the watch to inject herself in order to keep living, sort of thing. Because the more traditional means are not accessible out here in the wilderness. A lovely smell, like herbs and flowers, sweet, delicate and earthy. I imagine every single night that we sleep, we're probably going to get another one of these visions from the past, from the apothecary daughter's perspective, probably. As Esther slowly forces her eyelids open, that pleasant scent greets her with the morning sun, or it's just a vision for us to entail, to give us a bit more backstory behind what is going on here. Okay, Esther. She blinked around in confusion. This unfamiliar place. Was she dreaming? What kind of place has she awoken in? But as her mind dispelled this haze of sleep, the previous night's events came drifting back to her. Exactly, the forest, the manor. Seina, okay, so it's not S, it's C. Although you do pronounce them quite similarly. All of it was real. CS. Okay, not the letters, but when you put them into a name, they sound quite similar. So, must smell quite nice then. Esther dragged herself up into a seating position, rubbing her eyes with one hand. Then her gaze drifted down to the floor, where a small mug sat by her feet. It must have been from Seina. Curious, she bent down to pick it up and realized she's been smelling the fragrant tea inside. So that's what the herby flower smell was. After one sip of a warm drink, she felt instantly refreshed. It was like filling her lungs with cool, crispy morning air, a restorative that washed through and cleansed her system. Is it really alright to ask her that? I don't want to push her, she just looks so tired. Who are you speaking to, yourself? I don't know. A soft muttering caught Esther's attention. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw Seina sweeping the floor with a thoughtful expression, lost in whatever she was contemplating. If only you didn't hate visitors, Papa. I really could have used your advice. Seina shook her head, sighing wistfully. Oh, you're awake. Indeed I am. Did you notice the lack of fragrant tea left inside this fragrant teacup? Suddenly noticing Esther's gaze, of course you can fill it with other things, she let out a soft gasp and hugged over to the couch, her features quickly brightening into a smile. With both her hands, Seina clutched a broom that had to be twice her size, although she didn't look encumbered by it at all. Now I can handle things a lot more than my own size. I can handle a bear with my pinky. Hello, Seina. Thank you for the tea. Oh, it's nothing. I hope it hasn't gotten too cold. I can make a fresh pot if you like. No, I've already drank it. It's fine. You don't have to do that. You don't like other people doing things for you, do you, Esther? I'm sorry. I'll try to be better about it. Ah, wow. Are we that predictable to read? Esther averted to gaze, somewhat embarrassed by Seina's keen observation and apology. Oh dear. Have you been cleaning since you got up? I didn't hear at all. That's a craft in the arts of cleaning, is that you don't make much of a ruckus. Clearing her throat, she swiftly changed the subject. Yes, I have. There's a lot to clean in this big lovely house, so I need to do a little every morning and evening. You must clean really well. It's like there's a maid living here. But we is no maid. Oh, really? A happy flush rose to Seina's cheeks and she bounced on her toes a little. Very peppery about that. Well, it's not a chore or anything. I love cleaning, actually. That's something that only a few people could possibly say. A lot of us, we don't like cleaning at all. It's such a chore. She already said the words for me. Papa worked really hard to repair the house and make it pretty. It was a lot easier to clean when he was here, though. Aha. Some rooms are a little run down. I don't use them, so I don't dust those as much. I'll try my best to take care of the others, even if it's not perfect. Her smile wilted slightly, as if she were disappointed in herself for not keeping the entire house pristine. It's still amazing. Even if I loved cleaning, I couldn't care for this whole place alone. Of course you could, Esther. What do you mean? You put too much faith in her. It's almost as if you know a little more about Esther than you let on. And the way that you keep saying that you're happy to see her, it's almost as if you predicted her arrival in a way. But regardless, you do know more than you let on, Seina. She responded without missing a beat, giving a determined nod and tapping her broom on the floor. Anyone can do anything they really want to do, that is. Yeah, with enough motivation and money. They just have to figure out what way is best for them. Yep, I would like to have as much moolah as I can to make my dreams come true. But of course, money is never always the the best being to rely on. The other girl's confidence caught Esther off guard. She didn't seem to have a single cynical bone in her whole body. Sometimes when you think too wisely of a person, they will backstab you when you least expect them, and that is very far down the line. Which could be like the witch's house, actually. But anyway, I do hope you slept well, but it's the other way around. The visitor comes to kill the house's resident, rather than the house's resident kill off the visitor. I'm sure you must have been very tired. I can see in your eyes. They were so shadowed. Really? Stop it! Stop showing such sincere kindness. Our heart can't take it. A hint of concern crept into Seina's voice as she studied Esther's face closely. You do look a little better today, though. Not as gloomy. Were we gloomy before? After you finish your tea, shall we go take care of the grounds today? If you're feeling up to it, I mean. Of course I am. Yes. And it's the least I can do to repay you. Seina seemed like she was about to remind her there was no need to repay anything, and Esther was taking all of this far too seriously. Esther was quite used to hearing that response, despite the fact that nobody ever seemed to really mean it. But in this case, there could be some sort of sincerity involved, rather than it just being like a business-related thing. Whatever makes you the most happy, that's what a good hostess would say, I think. A great hostess. Just don't overwork yourself, alright? I feel like you're stubborn enough to keep going until you faint. Wow. Alright. After beaming at Esther encouragingly, Seina hoisted her broom up and cleared her throat. And to present thy words... Alright. I'll go finish sweeping the kitchen while you drink your tea. Then we'll go out. Okie dokie. Oh, it's such a lovely day. I can't wait to show you around. I'm so excited. Super excited. With a delighted sigh, she rushed over towards the kitchen where a broom swaying across the floor in a flurry of motion. What a peculiar girl she was. Maybe it was to be expected, considering she lived all alone for so long. Nobody is forcing her to try and fit in with normal society. But that's the thing, right? What enabled these two people to try and escape from society itself and live this life of what you would call social isolation, which I would think under these current circumstances would be the best thing to do before it broke out. For that reason, Esther couldn't really get a grasp on her behaviour or her personality. An enigma, as it were. And what is her motive for being so friendly, aside from being friendly itself? And that made her all the more curious about the story behind Seina's unusual situation. Another look at the decrepit scenery before us, although there is some life to it. As Esther's gaze drifted up to the radiant blue sky, it almost felt like she'd been transported to a different forest. But does this manor go to different forests? The dark, oppressive atmosphere of her previous night had vanished, transforming once more into a fairy tale shimmer. And with Seina's company, the woods didn't seem quite so vast and daunting, or as lonely for that matter. Alright, we're off to the well first, to gather some water, I imagine. Reaching down beside the front door, Seina picked up 2 buckets from beneath a protective cloth, although both were decently sized. One was smaller and looked less professionally made, as if an amateur had crafted it. It was all of their heart and spirit into it, even if they're not the most experienced. After a brief pause, Seina held the larger bucket out to Esther. In that moment of hesitation, her gaze misted over with a distant look. Shall we? What are you thinking, Seina? She reached out to take Esther's free hand. What? Come on now, we're not couples. It seems like a subconscious movement, as if Seina hadn't even realized she'd done exactly. I don't want to hold hands, but some warmth of those lightly courteous fingers caught Esther off guard. Normally, she always disliked being torched, and not in that way, but curiously enough, Seina's delicate grasp didn't give her the same sense of discomfort. Yes, let's go. We shall go then. It's very uncomfortable for both of them in a way, but they do want to be very contented. Seina gave her a soft, contented smile, although it seemed more melancholy than usual. As unexpected sadness briefly tugged at Esther's chest, and she had the odd sense she'd glimpsed something she shouldn't have. Hand in hand, they wandered across the manor grounds, heading for a well out by the garden. Neither of them spoke, neither of them looked eye to eye, but they had each other and their own companionship. Even though they have been friends for under 24 hours, they both gained inimicable trust with one another. Only the sound of birds' song and their light footsteps in the leaves filled the air. It seemed strange for Seina to be so quiet, but Esther was a little relieved too. She didn't feel any pressure to speak. I've played a game like that recently where they both kind of comforted from the quietness in the air while not being pressured to be spoken to constantly. Venus' Improbable Dream it was. Briefly she wondered if Seina had completely lost herself in thought, perhaps even forgetting Esther's presence. But as if she could somehow read Esther's mind, Seina glanced over towards her. The smile on her face had grown more contented once more. Most traces of sadness drying up beneath the warm sunlight. Sunlight does that. It gives you a bit more energy, radiancy, and they step up to the well then. I'll let you go first, if you like. Thanks. She turned to look at Esther expectantly, tilting her head to one side. Nodding, Esther turns towards the well, scanning over it hastily. Hastily, I mean. It had to be quite simple. Surely? All she needed was to tie the rope to the bucket. Is it all that simple, though? But was it right? That was it right, so surely she could just lower it down afterwards. She wasn't very good at tying knots. Same here. I never liked tying knots, so I never learnt really how to tie a knot. And that's with most things. I could barely tie my shoes. What if it couldn't hold the water's weight, and she lost Seina's bucket down the well? But Esther realized the other girl was watching her closely, eyes widening in realization. What on earth is going on between these two? Have you ever drawn water from a well, Esther? But also, how long has this well been functioning as a place for water? Surely it can't just keep refilling forever and ever, right? That downcast look is an answer in itself. She must never have done this before. Struck with a sudden sense of self-consciousness, Esther shook her head. It seems like such a basic thing to do, and yet she'd never really had the chance. Well, if you're not used to it, then how can you learn it if you don't have it near you? Really? But how do you get water? We have something called a tap. It comes through from pipes from lakes and stuff like that. We have a water pump. The servants are normally the one who use it. So yeah, basically she's never done what you'd call peasant work. It's something we should all learn about, really. As Esther spoke, she started feeling more and more sheepish, more ashamed. Talking about servants made her sound so privileged and haughty, yeah. She hoped Seina wouldn't think less of her for it. Well, we all have different backgrounds. So the water comes right to you, and your servants fetch it, so you don't even have to do any work. That sounds amazing. You must be something like a princess or a noble. More likely a noble. I'm not a princess. Not as a title, but you can be anyone's princess, for goodness sakes, if you want them to be. A lot of people in my city have servants. We only keep a few, but some families have dozens, because they have the money to do so. Dozens? As if trying to imagine such a thing, Seina closed her eyes, letting out an envious sigh. Yeah, there must be so much more to the city than what Papa told me. It's like another world or something, isn't it? A big world, filled with claustrophobia and anguish, and many, many drunkards. For some reason, that thought made Esther feel a little chest-fallen. Really now, what experiences of the city have you had to make you so chest-fallen? Well, even if you were a princess, I don't think it would matter. Would it not now? Her focus returned to Esther. Seina put on a bright, confident smile, like she just suddenly come to a realization about something. As long as I know where you come from, and you know where I came from, we should be able to understand each other easily, right? And it makes me really happy to hear about your home, even if I know I'll never fit in there. For one, Seina's smile was contagious. Even if she doubted the other girl's words, they put Esther slightly more at ease. Seina didn't seem like she even ever judged her for not knowing something. Indeed, that's correct. I don't think you'd like the city, since it's not a very nice place, but it's all I've ever known. Indeed, it probably is, so therefore you would only know one kind of environment. Oh, I'm sure it can't be fair. Don't trust me, Seina. I'd rather live out here in the wilderness where you are than in the city, for goodness sakes. Although I would like the house to be a little bit closer to the city so that I can get supplies and stuff, you know. But you and Papa come from cities after all, so there has to be some good people there. Absolutely. She punctuated her words with a confident nod, unfazed by Esther's hesitance. Anyway, shall we fetch some water? I'll go first so I can show you the best way to tie the knot. Indeed, here, just like this. Would it be sturdy enough though? Esther watched as Seina secured the rope to her bucket, lowering it down with a winch until it splashed into the water. Afterwards, when she mimicked Seina's knot with her own, larger bucket, Esther felt a wave of relief when it managed to make a return journey. Her smaller companion seemed thrilled too, even if it was an unremarkable feat. Perhaps she was just excited to impart her knowledge. Impart what she had learnt onto others. Buckets in hand, they set off towards the gardens, water cheerfully splashing with each step. Despite Seina's small frame, she carried her full bucket with little effort. She's a small girl, but she is much stronger than most men. Years of solitary labour must have given her strength that belied her size. Esther felt her arms already getting slightly sore from the heavy weight, but she made a determined effort not to show any trace of discomfort in front of Seina. Here we are, Esther. We're in the gardens. My garden. What do you think? What does your gardens grow? As they came to a stop along the rows of neatly planted crops, Seina swiveled around to look up at Esther eagerly. Oh, what do you think then? I can't believe you do all of this alone. Do you have servants that do it for you, Esther? It's so pretty and well kept. Ah, bashful. You really think so? Indeed it is. Esther nodded, her gaze drifting across the diverse, meticulously cared for vegetables and leafy greens with admiration, with determination, with impressiveness. Not oppressive. Impressive. Well, actually, Papa was one who made the first garden patch here. He wanted to live off what he could grow and forage for himself because he hated relying on other people. I only saw him visit the city a few times a year. That was probably when he was absolutely dire for a certain kind of resource. He taught me how to do everything by myself too. Well, not everything, but he did write an almanac and a foraging book, and he made them really easy to understand. Just for me. So as long as the earth is still alive, I know I'll be alright. I think that goes across for all of us. Not just you. Humming contentedly to herself, Seina led the way over to a large watering can that sat near a row of peas. Once she emptied her bucket into the can, she traded the empty vessel with Esther, a convenient way to hold plucked weeds. Luckily for Esther, weeding wasn't a task that needed much instruction. Were you already familiar with it then? It didn't take long for them to settle into a comfortable pace together, with Seina watering and fussing over her crops while Esther pulled out unwanted sprouts. Although gardening had never really appealed to her before, it surprised Esther how relaxing it was to work with her hands like this. Working side by side helped diminish the awkwardness that still lingered between them. As well, and before long, Esther felt comfortable enough to take the silence with a question. Do you ever get nervous when it gets colder? In case there isn't enough food to last you until spring, I mean. Oh no, not really. Some plants grow all the way through winter. Yep, like sprouts. And things like potatoes will last for a while in my pantry. You can dry out berries and mushrooms, and nuts are always good too. There are a lot growing around here, so I never run out of those. It's always good to have an ample of different things growing. Self-sufficient was the phrase I was trying to come up with. Motioning towards some shrubs at the edge of the clearing, Seina hefted her watering can with a light grunt before she continued. Hefted. Actually, I think it's quite fun when a new season comes along. I mean, it means I can plant new foods and make new recipes. I really miss winter if it never came, even if the house does get icy cold. Icy cold? Isn't it cozy by the fireplace? As long as you're covered in blankets. Not when the wind is so chilly, for goodness sakes. It's a little bit draughty still, but with some hot tea, it's perfect. Oh, that reminds me, I have to show you my winter recipe book sometime. I'm making a new spring one, since I've been trying a lot of different things, and there are really so many amazing combinations you can have with just... With a small smile warming her face, Esther listened as Seina began recounting tales of her recent cooking and foraging adventures. It felt so calm and comfortable somehow. Perhaps Seina had noticed how little Esther liked to speak, so instead of asking too many questions, she lightly chatted away about lettuce and peas, her voice filling the silence like the bubbling of a stream. After they'd finished weeding and watering, they brought their empty pails and a few small trowels to venture outside the clearing. Eager to share her knowledge, Seina guided Esther to the best foraging spots she'd found, pointing out which berries, nuts and wild greens were best to gather. The more that Esther learned, the less harsh and daunting the forest appeared. Surviving in the wild always struck her as a daunting task, but Seina's simple, cheerful explanations made it seem like something anyone can accomplish as long as they put in enough effort. Effort is half of it, knowledge is the other half of it. You could have all the knowledge in the world, but if you can't be bothered to do anything, then all that knowledge is pointless. But if you have all of the motivation in the world to learn, but not the knowledge there in the first place, then you'll quickly pick up on it because you have a motivation to learn it. None of this seemed like work for Seina either. It almost seemed like they were just playing together instead. Esther couldn't help but envy her energy and enthusiasm, the way she managed to take so much joy from everything. And yet at certain times, there was something unusually determined and purposeful about her effervescent happiness. It's as if it were another method of survival, just like her gardening or foraging were. Ah, the sun's so bright today. Too bright for one's eyes? Oh look, it's already a bit past midday. How can you tell the time? Time's been flying much faster than it normally does. How does it? All this work made me really hungry. Are you hungry, Esther? Esther is a little bit hungry. She forced her words to sound non-Holland, but in reality, Esther was just as flummoxed. Normally she had to force herself to eat or simply forget about it at all, but not today. Not today when we have lots of food around us. Is that your stomach growling? It's not. It's absolute... No, it's probably just... Yeah, that downcast look tells us all, really. Oh. Alright then. Damn it. Well, if you wait for me on the little log near the garden, I'll bring back some food for us. Thanks. I'll be just a few minutes, I promise. Meet you there. Turning around, she bounced off in the direction of the manor, her hair fluttering wildly in the wind. Following Seina's footsteps back towards the clearing, Esther made her way towards the fallen log near the garden patch. Before long, Seina's small figure trotted back into view, a little splash of white and pink flittering across the grass. Flitting? Not flittering. After stopping briefly at the well, she approached Esther's chosen picnic spot with careful steps, balancing 2 bowls on one hand while carrying a bucket of fresh water in the other. Here we are. I just made something small and quick, but it should give us enough energy to finish today's chores. Thanks. Beaming proudly, she offered Esther one of the bowls. It held a hearty salad topped with lentils and various seeds. Oh dear. Not like a red berry though. A red berry gaze glistened on the leaves, tucked into each bowl with a generous slice of warm bread. Okay, now we're talking. Lightly toasted from the stove. Thank you. It looks delicious. It's really nothing. To us it's a lot. Not nothing. But my baby listeners would be so happy to hear that. They always like a bit of encouragement. Oh my gosh. This is someone who talks to their vegetables, isn't it? Who was that character from Atlia who talked to vegetables and stuff like that? One of those scenarios again. You talk to your lettuces? I usually chatter with all of my plants. Do they respond back there? They were the only friends I really had before you came here. Although they didn't exchange any words while eating, the atmosphere between them gradually settled into something calm and comfortable. Now and then, Seina would glance over Esther, offering her to smile as soon as they made eye contact. She seemed happy just to be able to share a meal together. In a way, Esther could understand why. Normally, she preferred to eat alone. Other people made her feel self-conscious about her shyness or the way she ate her food. But somehow Seina's quiet company didn't bother her, like if she wasn't there at all, or she didn't feel like a bothersome presence around Esther. Now that they were a little more familiar with each other, perhaps the other girl didn't feel like she needed to constantly fill the silence all the time. But in case if you do need to fill it at times because of certain situations cropping up, we don't know. Once they finished eating, the two girls made a brief return to the manor. Brief, you say? But why only brief? Despite Seina's protest, Esther stubbornly insisted on washing up their dishes. Her pride refused to let the younger girl handle everything. Even Seina was probably far more capable at it. I want to learn it as well. We all want to learn this sort of stuff, even if we don't necessarily think we're going to use it on a day-to-day basis. But here we are. Here you are, Esther. When they reunited outside, Seina handed her a large, sturdy broom, even bigger than the one she'd be using earlier. This is a 7-foot one this time. Just like with the bucket, she held a second broom that was smaller and more suited to her size. Even though it was still too big and much larger than she is. The broom was far heavier than Esther expected. It had the slightly dusty, preserved look of something that has been sat and used for years, but hadn't been forgotten. I remember you. I know we've already done a lot today, so if you need a rest, just tell me, please. No, I insist. Thank you. But I'm fine. I can keep working. The place we're heading to is a few minutes' walk from the manor. Let's go, shall we? We'll go then to the place which you're speaking about. It's definitely not going to be a haunted scenario because, well, it's starting to turn night, isn't it now? Motioning for Esther to follow, Seina set off eagerly into the woods. Her excitement must have hastened her steps, for Esther suddenly had trouble keeping up with her lively pace. They hurried along a slender, winding path, and the manor's statuesque presence soon disappeared among the branches. Once it did, Esther found herself swiftly losing all sense of direction among the sea of vibrant leaves. She was thoroughly glad she had Seina to guide her. Otherwise, it seemed unlikely she'd ever find her way back through the wilderness of these never-ending forests and canopies of these trees. All of them looked the same because, well, they all look equally different. Here we are! A short while later, they emerged into a less densely wooded area. Still densely wooded, though. At first, Esther thought she was imagining things. But when she looked more closely, she realized she was seeing exactly what she thought. And what would that be? What would that... Oh, a cemetery. Huh. So we remove the garden stuff away from the... Oh gosh, what can I think today? Tombstones and stuff like that to preserve the tombstones themselves. A serene, beautiful graveyard, captured in the golden sunlight like a forgotten relic lost to time. Rows upon rows of headstones stood between the trees, each one a different shape and size. But despite their obvious age and the fact that they were nestled in the woods instead of a proper clearing, every grave looked incredibly clean. It gave the cemetery a strange, ethereal atmosphere, with the same awe and reverence that surrounded mythical artifacts in a museum. Mythical artifacts. Here we have the mausoleum of the place. Not far in the distance, a large mausoleum rose up the shore of the graveyard's pond, casting a somber reflection across the water. It caught Esther's eyes, and for a moment she found herself mesmerized by its towering presence. Are you looking at the mausoleum? I sure am. It's locked, I'm afraid. I've looked all over the manor and the grounds, but I don't think I'll ever find the key. Papa must have lost it. Oh, this must be where the key was. Well, where the key fits then. You going to offer up the key then, Seina? Sorry, Esther, I mean? Seina offered a small, wistful smile, shaking her head. You look disturbed. Esther pulled her focus back to the other girl, blinking. It felt like something strange had come over her briefly, but she had no idea what it was. The key you found. Why do you tend to this place so closely? Is anyone you know buried here? No, I don't know any of them. To Esther's surprise, Seina shook her head. It seemed far too insensitive to ask where Seina's father was buried if he wasn't in the graveyard, so Esther bit her lip and let the other girl continue. Actually, I don't really know who's buried here. Papa never gave me much of an answer. But since this manor belonged to his family, the cemetery is probably for old relatives. All of the graves seemed like they have been here for a very long time. As her gaze drifted across the headstones, Seina's expression grew a little more distant again. I don't know why, but I've always been drawn here ever since I was a little girl. Was it the peace of the cemetery provided? That could be actually. Like, cemeteries are usually a sad place because we go there to remember those who have departed from us. But it's also a place of peace and tranquility in a way because it gives you space and time to breathe and refresh yourself. It feels so peaceful, lonely, but peaceful, and comforting in a strange way. Like a place that will always be here, always the same, as long as I take care of it. Her words trailed off slowly, ending in a little more than a whisper, then faded into the breeze. But only a few lingering seconds had passed before Seina seemed to catch herself, blinking and restoring a brighter smile to her face. And, well, if you let me show you what I usually do here. It's an easy chore and very calming. I think you'll like it. So we've got brooms for that? Esther, are you going to acknowledge the fact that the key that you picked up might be the mausoleum key? It was impossible to just ignore the brief moments that came over Seina, where it seemed like she wasn't aware of Esther's presence at all. But then again, after being alone for so long, it was only natural that she'd fall back into her own thoughts now and then. I'm ready. I'm ready. With these brooms, sweeping is involved somehow, I assume. It is, but no, it's just a educated guess. Not a clever guess, an educated guess. Why would you carry a broom with you if you're not going to sweep? I mean, you could just use it for witchery, for goodness sakes. Come. I will start over here in the northwest patch. Yeah, start at the far end and then close yourself at the closest end. Gently taking Esther's hand, Seina led her over to the first row of graves. She demonstrated how she cleared each headstone of stray leaves and surrounding weeds, and once or twice a week, picked little bunches of flowers to rest beside the markers. Like Seina had said before, the task was easy and calming. Despite her initial hesitance, Esther soon found herself enjoying how peaceful the cemetery felt, and honouring the dead certainly seemed like a worthwhile effort. Yet despite the soothing lull in thoughts it afforded her, and the secluded beauty that surrounded them, Esther couldn't shake a sense of uneasiness that tingled at the nape of her neck. a sense that they were not alone in the cemetery. It was completely irrational, and she couldn't explain it no matter how hard she tried. But even in the daytime, with the sun's gentle afternoon rays filtering through the trees, something about the graveyard shadows struck her as peculiarly haunting. What about it is peculiarly haunting then? As the evening began to slowly settle over the forest, the two girls made their way back to the manor. Despite her tiredness, Esther's heart leapt at the prospect of finally beginning her research once they arrived. And, true to her promise, Seina took Esther straight up to her father's study. Lovely. By the time they arrived, however, the towering bookshelves blocked out most of the remaining sunlight, so they had to fetch a few candles to alleviate the gloom. I wonder how you get candles if you don't have access to the city, Seina. According to Seina, she used such light sources sparingly, as non-wood fuel was difficult to stockpile. Indeed it would be. Luckily, there were a few types of shrubs and trees in the forest that she could, oh, this is smart, extract wax from, as well as seeds and nuts that could be crushed for oil. But since Esther was a special guest, Seina reassured her that she could light as many candles as needed during her stay. How much, though, until you grow a hesitancy to keep using these candles? It feels so long since I've seen any candlelight in this room. Reminds you of anything? Well, it had been quite long, I suppose. The last time was when Papa was still around. My bad. Setting a newly lit candle down on the desk, Seina let out a quiet sigh. At the beginning of this episode, I was reading so very well, but now I'm just not able to do that. Seina, your father. I've been meaning to ask, what was his name? Oh, his name was Esther. Esther? It's so strange to say it out loud, since I never called him that. I only heard someone use his name once, back when I was really small. Very small. She fiddled with the hem of her dress, her gaze drifting away from Esther's. I'm sorry about the mess in here. All these loose papers will probably make it hard for you to find what you're looking for. Well, Papa never liked to throw things away, especially not his letters. Not even his little scribbles or notes. No, because somebody else could see those little scribbles and notes, and they'd be able to use that for their own endeavours. Papa always told me not to peep at his writing, so even now I try to leave them as they are. You'll probably think I'm very silly for it, I'm sure. No, you've just been a very good child. A very good child for your parent. I can help you with anything else, though. Would you like me to sort out the books, maybe? No, it's alright. You've been very kind to me already. I don't want to push you any further. Her words were quiet and gentle, but firm. She didn't want to take advantage of Seina's generosity, and although she'd never mentioned directly, Esther also needed some time alone. Home alone. And alright then, I'll leave you to it. Thank you. If you need me, I'll be in the kitchen fixing up dinner. You can come down whenever you're ready. It should be preferable to when dinner's ready, though. Beaming at Esther encouragingly, she turned towards the door, lifting her hand in a little wave. Bye-bye for now. Good luck. Good luck with the research. Thank you. As Seina's presence faded away, the study's atmosphere steadily began to shift. A dark, grim cloud of memories seemed to hang over the room. Spectres of unending nights and restless sleep. Although Esther couldn't pinpoint exactly why, she had the distant sense that this chamber belonged to a deeply troubled mind. Clutching a candle in one hand, she started to scan through the shelves, her eyes flickering across the numerous titles. Seina was right. Her father really had collected a staggering assortment of books, But as she glanced over the various titles before her, Esther noticed something unusual. Despite Asias's obvious focus on alchemy, there seemed to be almost as many books on ghosts and spirits, and a number of treatises on the supernatural. Very interesting. But could her Pale Cachexia be tied to the supernatural? That's what I'm thinking. Is it Was it caused by a supernatural being? Were they related to his search for a cure at all? Or was there some other reason for his apparent obsession? Esther couldn't understand how ghosts might be related to a pale, like a curse, you would think, so maybe he'd simply found them interesting to research. Still, the anomaly struck out in her mind, leaving her with a nagging set of questions. As she opened up a large book on biology, suddenly a loose leaf of parchment fluttered out. Esther bent down to pick it up, turning the aged paper over in her hands. It looked like a journal entry, but there was no date to be found. That's very handy. We can't piece together the journal entries and put them in order unless there's a date on them. Unless you can meticulously see which part started first and which part started later. Curiously squinting at the messy script, Esther brought it over to the nearest lamp and began to read. Squinting means it decreases the amount of light that is caught onto your eye, meaning that wherever you can see left, you'll be able to focus on it. 7 days have passed since Amaranth left me. Amaranth must be his wife then. 3 days since Jermaine told me he saw her with another man. Oh no, damn. Her previous husband, now miraculously returned from his absence. I cannot eat. I cannot sleep. My heart bounds with manic energy between rage and this crushing sense of abandonment. In the depths of my darkest moods, I look back on the long months of her pregnancy, months that I spent on carpentry, furnishing, cleaning, planting, remaking this dusty tomb of an estate into a family manor. All for her, all because she could never stand life in the dreadful city. And where is she now? Back in his chambers, no doubt, embracing him in the darkness so that she might hide the shameful stretch marks of her maternity. Damn her. That psychophonic wretch. Damn her and her luscious, adulterous blank of a husband. Oh, how I used to wonder what such a beautiful soul as her might have seen in a waste of flesh like him. But now, with the veil lifted from my eyes, I finally understand. They are alike, two souls perfectly matched in their shallowness and fickle attentions. What a ridiculous fool I was, ever believing that she might come to truly care for a penniless researcher, one with nothing to offer but himself. And now, what am I left with? A small child, and no mother to raise it. An old family home, and no family to fill its many chambers. A retirement from my life in medicine, without anything worth left to retire for. I wonder if Seina actually knows this, actually. I don't think she would be noticed of this. Like, there are many things that the father would not tell their daughter. Would I be wrong in assuming so otherwise? No, I refuse. I refuse to let her triumph over me. I will remain here, away from the toxic collaboration, isolated among the fruits of my sweat and labour. With these foundations I have laid in the land, I know I can survive solely by myself, without recourse to the city's indulgent pleasures. Here, amidst my tomes and papers, I will press onward in my research towards the last and most important focus of my life, a cure for this disease. And as for the little girl, we look nothing alike, she and I. Indeed, now that I am privy to her mother's treachery, I suspect her father may be another man entirely. The little hairs on her head are purely golden, and everything from her eyes to her lips is nothing but a bitter replica of that woman's features. She even has the same twinkling, uncaring laugh, as if the world could never touch her, nor dare to make her cry. Just because you share traits of your parents does not inherently make you that person. Because that person represents that person visually, does not mean that internally they also represent the same person or similar. There's obviously similarities between every child and their parent, but the makeup of everyone is entirely different. Not entirely, but there's bound to be something that is different. The very thought irritates me to no end. I cannot bear the sight of her, an unending reminder of the future that was stolen from me. Thus I am resolved. I will take the girl to the city, and leave her in the hands of the orphanage there. A less cruel fate, no doubt, than to remain forever imprisoned with an unloving father. In the end, I know I could never truly amount to anything more for her. But you never went through with it, did you? Ultimately, you never went through with departing your daughter to the orphanage. As Esther's eyes drifted across the page's last words, she felt a strange, uncomfortable sense of guilt in her chest. It's like she really peered into the family's life somehow, non-purposefully. The girl he was talking about, he had to have meant Seina. Did he really feel so bitterly towards her? Obviously, Esther hadn't taken his daughter to an orphanage, but his resentment of her sounded deep-rooted. It felt invasive and overly intimate to be reading his private thoughts, but did she really have much choice? If there was any chance Esther's writings hinted at a cure, she had to go through everything, including his journals, in case he mentioned any important research. Otherwise, there was a very good chance she'd miss something. No matter how personal it gets, Esther, no matter how painful the personal treachery is, one will need to go through it if they want to find a cure for themselves, a cure for the Pale Cachexia. Tucking the journal page away, she hastily pushed the book back into its shelf. Now she was even more glad that she decided to search alone. Some parts of the past were better off remaining buried, it seemed. Attempting to banish the journal page from her mind, Esther combed through a few stacks of papers and books lying around the study, scanning through them in attempts to glean any useful information. But her exhaustion from the day's work on all of the exotic, erudic nature of Esther's research made it increasingly difficult to concentrate. Perhaps she was better off returning the next day, when presumably she'd have more energy to scan over things. But the thing is, you would still be exuding the same amount of energy into your work throughout the day, so you'll be ending up in the same predicament as today. Okay, folks, this is gonna be a little bit of a cliffhanger, if I'm going to say so myself, sorry, because Esther learns something quite deep today about the possible disconnection between the father and the daughter here, and the prospects of the mother just running away to somewhere else. But the question is, how did the daughter come to the father if the mother ran away while still being pregnant? That's a little bit of a mystery in itself. So at some point she must have came back. Otherwise the daughter would never be in the father's possession in this case, or under the father's care, or under this manor's care. But how much time did the father spend when it came to restoring this manor from an old decrepit place into a beautiful family manor house? It must have taken years to do that by himself. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'm deeply intrigued by the mysteries of this game. It's very ethereal as this game has presented itself out to be. Gothic? I'm not so sure about Gothic. I'm struggling to see where the Gothic nature of this all fits in. But there's definitely fantasy and mystery involved. Maybe the Gothic part of it comes about later on, but I'm deeply entwined by this game's mysteries and the kinetic nature of it all. There's no choice in a kinetic novel, by the way. It's just, you play for the game, and that's it. There's no choices, no multiple routes, there's no multiple endings, it has one ending. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and see you all in the next time of Pale Cachexia. Thank you all so much for watching, and take care of yourselves.